Old Country Buffet was a beloved dining establishment primarily located across America's heartland, and countless individuals, myself included, cherish fond recollections of meals enjoyed there. Perhaps you share similar sentiments? During my childhood, what captivated me most was the impressive array of sweet treats available. They displayed numerous small plates featuring these perfectly cubic cake portions that you could simply take, and believe me, I took plenty. Holiday feasts and childhood visits to Old Country Buffet represent some of the most satisfyingly full moments of my entire life. Simply reminiscing about that establishment brings me joy, and I remained a patron until the option disappeared. Here's the reality. Old Country Buffet has ceased to exist, and from what I can determine, there are currently no operating locations anywhere, with little indication this situation will reverse. Would it surprise you to learn that the corporation behind Old Country Buffet declared bankruptcy 3 separate times? Actually, that's not quite accurate. It was 4 times, which I believe surpasses any other business I've examined on this platform. These occurred in 2008, 2012, 2016, and 2021, interestingly aligning with Summer Olympics years. Remarkable, isn't it? I'm attempting some levity here because the situation is genuinely disheartening. It's been an extended, gradual deterioration that has left many questioning what went wrong. This is an important narrative that connects significantly to other major buffet brands like Hometown Buffet and Ryan's all have vanished. And I'll endeavor to explain why by highlighting what I consider the 5 primary factors contributing to their downfall. But initially, allow me some time to discuss why they achieved such remarkable success originally. The rise. In 1983, Roe Hatlin and Dennis Scott joined forces to establish Old Country Buffet. Both brought restaurant industry expertise, having held significant positions at another chain named King's Table, enabling them to leverage their standing and networks to secure sufficient investor funding to launch the inaugural Old Country Buffet location in early 1984. It proved nearly immediately successful. First-year revenue approached double their projections, and expansion was rapid. By that decade's conclusion, it had become a publicly listed corporation operating 70 establishments and producing over $100 million annually. Their success stemmed from numerous distinguishing features compared to other cafeteria-style chains. Some major distinctions included the all-inclusive Model 1 payment upon entry granted access to everything, including drinks, salads, and those wonderful desserts, rather than individual item pricing. Small batch cooking rather than preparing large quantities beforehand. Food was made in smaller batches, ensuring everything stayed hot and fresh with a superior quality presentation. The scatter bar arrangement beginning in 1989, they began positioning food at various islands distributed throughout the space, contrasting with the conventional single-line setup virtually everyone else employed then. The benefit was easier food access with minimal waiting. During the 1990s, competitors adopted this identical format. They reportedly achieved a 177% compound annual growth rate throughout that period. These details might not register consciously while dining there, but Old Country Buffet essentially advanced the format and prospered because of it. If I had to identify one particular year representing their absolute zenith when they were largest and most promising, just before circumstances declined, I'd say that year was 2000. They dominated as the nation's largest buffet, reportedly commanding a 22% market share, making them nearly double anyone else's size. Perhaps even more remarkable was their streak of 12 straight quarters, showing same-store sales increases, essentially indicating growing restaurant traffic. Hey, quick favor before we dive deeper. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the company's documentary, smash that like button and subscribe. The reason I identify this as a pivotal moment brings me to my first factor: leverage buyouts. In 2000, Old Country Buffet's leadership believed the company was performing considerably better than its stock valuation suggested. When you observe something selling below what you consider its true worth, purchasing it might seem intelligent, correct? That's precisely their action. They assembled these New York-based private equity companies, borrowed substantial sums, and paid exceeding $650 million to acquire the company from public shareholders and delist it. Before this transaction, the company carried approximately $40 million in obligations. Afterward, it exceeded $400 million, substantially higher, though potentially manageable if the company maintained growth and fulfilled those elevated expectations. Well, you can probably anticipate what followed. In subsequent years, for various reasons, people visited Old Country Buffet far less frequently, and revenue declined. Profits proved insufficient to comfortably handle those interest obligations. They began shuttering the poorest performing locations to minimize losses and improve efficiency, but you cannot really downsize significantly while still owing $400 million. In summary, the buyout positioned them precariously and proved a gamble that failed. By 2006, those private equity companies contemplated selling the concept before an opportunity emerged that led them down an entirely different direction. This brings me to the next factor: overextending. This factor almost continues from the first, but contains numerous additional layers. From inception, Old Country Buffet's leaders aggressively expanded the concept. What began as a single establishment in a strip center on Minneapolis's outskirts required only 6 years to become a substantial chain, spending millions acquiring competitors. Notably, in 1996 they invested nearly $200 million purchasing a chain of almost 100 establishments called Hometown Buffet. It was partially debt-funded in somewhat complicated matters, but overall represented a logical acquisition. 5 years earlier, Dennis Scott, Old Country Buffet's co-founder, had departed the company to launch a new buffet concept in San Diego called Hometown Buffet. It employed that same scattered bar format and offered similar cuisine, so it was almost perfect for reuniting the co-founders and expanding their West Coast footprint. The customer base existed. It was an excellent match. The timing was favorable with everything trending upward, and they possessed the resources to execute it. Overall, I'd characterize it as a successful transaction. A decade later, they made a considerably less successful deal. While everything was deteriorating and they were considering selling the company, circumstances were also declining for another major buffet concept called Ryan's. Ryan's ownership expressed interest in selling, so Old Country Buffet's ownership seized the opportunity to acquire it. The rationale was that there's power in numbers. Scaling the operation would theoretically produce savings. Additionally, Ryan's was regarded as a southern chain based in South Carolina, so geographic overlap between the three chains was minimal. It was like an appealing opportunity to become the buffet super chain with 675 establishments nationwide, Hometown along the western seaboard, Old Country throughout the Midwest, and now Ryan's in the South. But unlike before, the timing wasn't ideal. It was a struggling chain acquiring another struggling chain. It wasn't a seamless fit because no prior connection existed, and Ryan's emphasized steak and grilling much more heavily. Most critically, this time Old Country Buffet truly lacked the resources to proceed, yet they paid considerably for it. They purchased Ryan's at nearly a 50% premium above its market value, and debt heavily funded it. Ultimately, they owed $800 million that they genuinely could not afford servicing. The following year, that merged company generated nearly $1.4 billion in revenue. Yet partially due to such substantial debt obligations, they ultimately lost over $100 million. External factors. I'm primarily referencing the economy here. People lacking disposable income for the all-you-can-eat dining experience significantly reduced traffic and revenue. It was already impacting Ryan's and Old Country Buffet separately and really escalated when they assumed additional debt to merge right as the economy entered its worst phase. They filed their initial bankruptcy in 2008, reporting obligations of $1.2 billion compared to under $1 billion in assets. They attributed external economic conditions as the primary cause of their difficulties, and from that point, it's been a continuous cycle of filing bankruptcy every 4 to 5 years, closing locations, attempting to improve efficiency, and reducing debt each time, but obviously never fully recovering to a stable position. Another external factor beyond the economy that harmed them was the pandemic. Most restaurants were affected, but buffets especially so. It's more of a communal dining format that doesn't easily adapt to drive-through or curbside collection. Honestly, I don't want to assign excessive blame to the pandemic in this instance, considering they were already greatly diminished and had filed bankruptcy 3 times before it began, but it was a significant factor in their 4th bankruptcy, as incredible as that sounds. They would likely still maintain a small presence otherwise. Changing ownership. I don't have extensive commentary on this factor, but experiencing bankruptcy and acquiring new ownership so frequently is chaotic. Different individuals with fresh concepts and conflicting visions attempting to implement new approaches every several years can be counterproductive. It's reached a point where I don't even consider it worthwhile to review each ownership group and discuss the modifications, because all have been temporary, and clearly none have been effective enough to halt that downward trajectory. I do want to mention that one ownership group was sued by an individual named Chris Gage after he experienced salmonella exposure in an Old Country Buffet in Cheyenne, Wyoming. It's truly a disturbing situation. He had a pre-existing condition addressed years earlier and was symptom-free until the exposure, which then caused terrible, debilitating complications. Ultimately, no representative even appeared in court for Old Country Buffet, resulting in a $1.4 million judgment against them, mentioned as a factor in their 2016 bankruptcy. I don't know, it's just an example of a costly payment and unfortunate situation that appears easily preventable and wasn't managed properly. Becoming outdated. My final factor is perhaps the most apparent: becoming outdated. There are several perspectives on this. One concerns the food itself. From the beginning, Old Country Buffet's menu centered on traditional home-style meals: fried chicken, mashed potatoes, things along those lines that probably don't have the best nutritional profile. As people have grown more health-conscious about their eating habits, we can theorize that consuming large quantities of seemingly unhealthy food has become less appealing to the average person. I mean, buffets generally have struggled. Fast casual establishments have become dramatically more popular since Old Country Buffet and others reached their peak, and so has home delivery. People are eating at home today considerably more compared to the 1990s. Overall, Old Country Buffet was, I believe anyway, a concept that appealed much more to an older demographic. In fact, if you search for them online, the most common result you'll discover today is an awkward training video that I have to think is probably the only exposure many younger people have had to the establishment. Most of the awkwardness stems from an employee they're attempting to make conversation with customers. Have you tried the lasagna? It's my favorite, which is fine and almost certainly not nearly as awkward in actual practice as the video portrays. But still, friendliness and conversation like that seems to be something valued much more by older generations. The final chapter. Believe it or not, I haven't even reached the most depressing part yet. In 2021, Old Country Buffet and the other buffet brands were acquired by Barbecue Holdings, the parent corporation of a barbecue restaurant chain called Famous Dave's. Back in 1999, Old Country Buffet had purchased a small chain of California steakhouses called Tahoe Joe's, and since then it remained an almost insignificant component of the company. Well, Barbecue Holdings purchased everything as a package through the bankruptcy court for $4.7 million solely because they desired those steakhouses to complement their existing ones. Their CEO states he has no intentions of reopening Old Country Buffet or any of the others. They simply came along with the transaction. It's so incredible to consider that this billion-dollar enterprise that so many of us have wonderful memories connected to has been reduced to something so insignificant that it was purchased by someone who didn't even desire it. Let me know in the comments. Have you visited Old Country Buffet? And if so, what do you remember most about them? Or perhaps you're more familiar with Hometown Buffet or Ryan's. If so, tell me about your experiences there. Unfortunately, it appears the final chapter may be closed on all these chains, so we need to discuss them here to preserve the memories and document them. All I'm saying is it would be unfortunate if that training video becomes their legacy. So any thoughts you have about Old Country Buffet, or Hometown Buffet, or Ryan's Buffet, or any other buffet I've said that word over 40 times now, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.